So if you've seen a lot of my videos, you would know I like to come up with a lot of ideas for what potential Assassin's Creed games could be made, and you also know that Ubisoft will never do any of them.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
But it's still fun to get a little creative and imagine what could be. An idea I've had for a while now, and I even made a video kind of coming up with the idea, would be an Assassin's Creed game featuring 4 of the series protagonists, being Shay Cormac, Arno Dorian, Connor Kenway, and Evelyn de Grandpré. From what we know, they are all alive still at the same point in time, so it just makes perfect sense. And of course, Shay wants to rebuild the Templars and seemingly wants to take down Connor's assassins, based on what he said when he killed Charles Dorian, and Arno of course has a score to settle with Shay, seeing as he killed his father, and Arno once again becomes an assassin after Dead Kings. Now I had a lot of ideas on how a game like this could work. My immediate thought was they could have a dual protagonist game as Arno and Shay, where you play as both characters, and by the end you get some kind of choice to decide between Arno and the assassins or Shay and the Templars. Still a neat idea I think, but I feel that would be too inconsistent, playing as 2 sides of the conflict. I mean, look at Last of Us 2. People hated that. It may not be solely because of the dual protagonist thing, but it certainly wasn't a popular idea among the fans. Instead, I think I'd rather have this be one solid narrative. No choices or anything like that where we have to worry about what's the canon ending and whatnot. Just one solid, consistent narrative. Remember those? In this age, a lot of games have choices, some of them just hitting you with them at the very end of a game. And while choices are fun and great for more full-fledged RPG games and series, I feel for the AC series, the traditional style is more appropriate. So for Assassin's Creed Vengeance, our main protagonist, the person you'll be spending the most time and playing as for a majority of the game, will be Arno Dorian. It makes the most sense to play as Arno. This story is personal for him. He's chasing his father's killer, whether he knows it or not. He's the youngest character here and with the most to improve and grow. Meanwhile, Shay will be the antagonist, with Connor and Evelyn being strong supporting characters, almost mentoring and guiding a young and enraged Arno, as Connor was once just like Arno. I feel that's the best format for this kind of game, the best way to balance this many big characters. Now as for when this will take place, it'll be 2 years after the events of AC Unity and Dead Kings, so about 1796, which puts Shay Cormac at 65 years old, Connor at 39, Evelyn at 49, and Arno is only 28 years old. This game would also take place in several locations, starting in Paris, France, and then transitioning to New York and Boston in the later acts. But to quickly recap where everyone is leading up to the events of this story, Arno is of course back in the Assassins, rising the ranks and trying to help the people of France as the revolution is still ongoing. Shay is recruiting and rebuilding the Templars, amassing their power so they can take down Connor's assassins in America, while Connor is the mentor of the Brotherhood at the homestead, and Evelyn is his right hand, helping him lead the new age of assassins. I would also like to say that I will only be covering major plot points in this game. Obviously, there would need to be more for the game to be long enough, but I just wanted to make that clear. So now that we all understand what everyone's up to, let's jump into the dark, thrilling story of Assassin's Creed Vengeance. We open on a dark, stormy night in Paris as we see none other than Shay Cormac appear. Shay is standing with a couple of other Templar associates who inform him that they have confirmed the location of the Assassin's Creed in France, the underground HQ we are familiar with from AC Unity. Shay explains that the Creed in France is a major obstacle in their quest to resurrect the Templar Order, and that they hold one of the precursor artifacts they need, and that it must be retrieved before heading to America. You're then immediately thrust into the action as you play as Shay in a mission to infiltrate the Creed's HQ and assassinate the council members and to retrieve the precursor artifact. Shay does so successfully. He may be old and gray, but he's still more than physically capable. Shay and the Templars and their escape head for a ship that's docked and ready to sail for America, and as they sail off, we fade to black where we then cut to Arno Dorian. Several days before the Creed Council was killed by Shay, they had sent Arno on a mission to find the last remnants of the Templars in France and finish them. You're then tasked with with playing as Arno and infiltrating the little area where seemingly the Templars have set up, and to eliminate all of them. Only Arno discovers that aside from the guards outside, the area is vacated. As he searches the rooms, he comes across plans and he quickly realizes it's a layout and location of the Creed's underground HQ. Arno immediately realizes what this means and starts running back and parkouring to the HQ as quickly as he can. As Arno arrives, his worst fears are realized, as he sees dead assassins everywhere, and he comes to find the council dead, except for one member who's barely clinging to life. The final surviving member of the council tells Arno with his final words that their assailant was the Templar Grand Master Shay Cormac. Arno is obviously not familiar with the name, and the council member tells him that Shay now has the precursor artifact and he's going to use it to discover the location of the Apple of Eden. And with his last breath, he tells Arno to seek out Connor Kenway in Boston and that he knows the location of the apple and will help him. Which is true, since Connor dropped the apple into the bottom of the ocean in the Tyranny of King Washington DLC for Assassin's Creed 3. Arno accepts the council's final request for him as he quickly rushes out to the docks to try and catch Shay and the Templars before their departure. But Arno is too late as he sees Shay's ship disappear into the dark night. Arno spends the next few days organizing a ship and crew to prepare for his voyage to America. Arno then sails off with his mission driving him, finding Connor Kenway and the apple. It's been a 6-month voyage, but Arno has finally arrived in the port of Boston, Massachusetts. Arno knows he must find Connor, but he has no idea where to look. As Arno wanders the city, he hears a loud commotion where he sees guards chasing after a mysterious hooded figure. Arno immediately begins to chase the figure and tracks them down to an alley. The hooded figure comes and attacks Arno from out of nowhere and has him held dead to rights with a hidden blade. Arno ensures the figure that he's not hostile and is looking for Connor Kenway as he points to the Creed's logo on his belt. The figure retracts the hidden blade and removes their hood, revealing themselves to be Aveline de Grandpré, the main character of Assassin's Creed Liberation. Aveline says she does not recognize Arno as one of their own, and Arno explains that he's come all the way from France to warn Kenway of the Templar threat and help him put a stop to it. Both of these characters are French, by the way. Doesn't really have anything to do with this, but I just realized that, so that's pretty cool. But anyways, Aveline tells Arno to follow her as she agrees to take him to Connor. A few hours have passed as Aveline and Arno make their way through the frontier by horseback as they finally come to see the Davenport homestead in the distance. As Arno and Aveline approach, they see several assassins training outside in combat. Aveline leads Arno around to the side of the homestead where Arno sees someone kneeling in front of a grave. The grave reads Achilles Davenport, and the person kneeling by the grave is none other than Connor Kenway. As Arno approaches Connor, Aveline introduces Arno to Connor, explaining why Arno has come and his mission. Connor nods understandably and explains to Arno that there's been a sudden resurgence of a Templar presence in Boston and New York over the past several months. However, they've been very careful and cautious, never exposing themselves for too long. Arno tells Connor he believes the Templars are being led by the Grand Master Shay Cormac, and he tells Connor about what happened to the Creed in France and that he's come to America to prevent that from happening again and to protect something called the Apple. Connor recognizes the name Shay Cormac as Achilles once spoke of him, and how he worked with his father Hatham to destroy the assassins several decades ago. Connor invites Arno inside the homestead to rest and recover after his long voyage at sea. As Arno settles and sits down, he pulls out his father's pocket watch, staring gloomingly at it. Connor sits down as well and notices Arno's interest in the pocket watch, where he asks him where he got it. Arno explains that it was his father's and that he always checks the watch even though he knows what time it will continue to show. Connor observes Arno and cracks a slight smile as he sees glimpses of himself in Arno. Connor tells Arno that he understands how he misses his father, where he goes on to explain that the grave outside was of his mentor and the man who was like a father to him, Achilles. Connor goes on to explain that Achilles practically raised him as he left his village at a young age to train under him and learn the assassin's ways. Arno asks about what happened to Connor's real father, as Connor, in a sad tone, explains his real father was a Templar Grand Grand Master and that he killed him in the pursuit of blind vengeance. Connor reflects, saying he was young, angry, and naive, and even though he believed in the assassins and what he was doing, he wished he had done things differently. Arno then explains how his father was an assassin but had died as a young boy. He was frustrated he could never find his father's killer, but just like Connor had with Achilles, Arno found a mentor and father figure in Francois de la Serre, who was killed as well. Arno goes on to say that anyone he's ever cared about ends up dead. Connor assures Arno he understands that feeling all too well, and that it's the price and sacrifice for life as an assassin, and that all they can do is continue to live on and fight for those who have died and sacrifice their lives for the cause. Arno nods, and a few hours later he begins to fall asleep, where he has a nightmare reliving the deaths of his father, de la Serre, Pierre Bellic, and Elise, where Arno is hopeless and powerless to stop any of it. Arno wakes up in an instant panic. It's morning and he hears assassins training outside. Arno walks out of the homestead to find Connor leading his students. Connor notices Arno and walks over to him, explaining that he sent Evelyn back to Boston to continue her investigation of the Templar presence, and that he would like for Arno to join a few other assassins on their journey to do the same in New York. Arno accepts the mission and heads out with a couple of other assassins for New York. Arno and the assassins travel for days on horseback before they finally arrive in the bustling city of New York. One of the assassins orders Arno and the others to split up around the city to try and dig up any information they can regarding any Templar activity. After several hours, Arno is unable to find any useful information and goes to meet up with the other assassins. They all meet up except one of the assassins is missing and has failed to check in. Arno and the others grow concerned, so they go to check out the area of the city he was supposed to search. Arno and the others enter a dark alley where they see the body of their brother, dead. Quickly, they are surrounded by Templars on both sides of the alley, with Arno and the others being trapped in the center. As Arno and the others prepare to fight, a mysterious voice yells at them to drop their weapons from the rooftops. A man decorated in red and black Templar robes and a hood appears, introducing himself as Shay Cormac. Shay makes his way down into the alley, where he once again demands Arno and the assassins lay down their weapons as they are heavily outnumbered. Arno, however, is lasered in on his target and, ignoring everything Shay just said, lunges at Shay with his hidden blade, as Shay easily disarms Arno and binds him to the ground. Shay orders his subordinates to kill the other assassins. As they do so, Arno curses in French. Shay recognizes the accents and robes Arno is wearing, and he realizes he is from France. Shay decides to spare Arno for now and question him to figure out why he's in America and how much he knows about the Apple and Connor. Shay knocks out Arno and the screen cuts to black. Arno awakens several hours later, chained to a wall, with Shay standing across the room. Shay notices Arno awakens and walks toward him with an intimidating presence. Shay proceeds to tell Arno he can make this easy on him and tell him everything he wants to know, or they can do it in a more forceful manner. Arno looks away in silence. Shay sighs and walks over and picks up a mysterious glowing object. It's the precursor box Shay took when he murdered Arno's father, Charles Dorian. Shay goes on to explain the box to Arno and how the box would normally need an Izu artifact to activate. However, instead he enlisted the aid of Benjamin Franklin to power the box using electricity. Shay explains that the box can do all sorts of things like deciphering ancient writings, produce holograms, but most importantly, show people's memories. This revelation has Arno in disbelief but also a slight worry as Shay brings the box close to Arno's face. Shay activates the box and begins to watch as Arno's memories are displayed. One particular memory, however, catches Shay's eyes. It's of Arno's father, Charles. Shay recognizes the face and looks at Arno. Shay asks Arno of his relation to Charles Dorian, and Arno, in a sudden outburst, asks how Shay knows of his father. Shay crouches down and whispers to Arno, "I'm the one who killed him." The revelation leaves Arno shocked and then quickly enraged as he jumps out at Shay, but is held back by the chain keeping him prisoner. Arno begins to yell and move frantically as Shay calmly continues to look through his memories. Shay sees that Arno had met Connor, but Connor never told him the location of the apple. With no further need for Arno, Shay starts to walk out of the room and orders the guard to kill Arno. As Shay walks out of the room with his back turned to Arno, Arno continues to yell at Shay, saying he will hunt him down if it's the last thing he does. As the guard approaches Arno, preparing to deal the killing blow, you can see a hooded figure clinging to the rafters. As the guard swings, the hooded figure jumps in and air assassinates the guard. It's Evelyn. Evelyn breaks Arno's chains and tells him to remain silent and follow her out. Arno questions how Evelyn knew he he was in trouble, as she explained that Arno and the assassins never sent word back to Connor of their status, so Connor sent her to see what was happening. Arno insists on just killing Shay now as he's still here, but Evelyn quickly shuts down Arno's request, saying there are far too many Templars in the building and they need to head back to the homestead and regroup. Arno isn't happy with it, but he agrees, as the two find their way out of the prison and escape, headed back to the homestead. Arno and Evelyn return. Arno is visibly defeated. Evelyn explains the situation to Connor and how Shay and the Templars have amassed a large amount of forces and have gained a huge foothold in New York. Evelyn even tells Connor that Arno learned Shay was the one who killed his father. Connor walks over to Arno and tells him that he's going to train him. Arno, suddenly determined and motivated by those words, nods his head. 4 months have passed since Arno returned to the homestead, and in that time he's been training directly under Connor, going on solo missions and gathering intel about the Templars' movements. Everything is now covered in snow with a blazing chill in the air. We cut to Arno training behind the homestead, doing the same course Shay once did when he was an assassin at the beginning of AC Rogue. Connor and Evelyn approach Arno, impressed by his skills and how much he's grown and improved over the 4 months. Connor yells out to Arno saying he has a task for him. Arno runs over to Connor, where Connor tells Arno and Evelyn that one of his assassins in Boston has spotted Shay and the Templars, seemingly getting ready to start moving towards the homestead. So Connor tasks Arno and Evelyn with going to Boston and assassinating Shay before he makes it to the homestead. Arno and Evelyn ride out immediately for Boston. When they arrive several hours later, they meet up with the assassin who spotted Shay. Only the assassin had walked Arno and Evelyn right into a trap, with guards completely surrounding them. Arno and Evelyn managed to fight their way out of the trap and chase down the traitor and interrogate him. When the traitor confessed his mission was simply to lure as many assassins out of the homestead as he possibly could, Arno and Evelyn immediately realized the plan. They kill the traitor, head for their horses, and start riding back to the homestead in a panic. We then cut back to Connor at the homestead. It's peaceful and quiet as he once again kneels at Achilles' grave, deep in thought, hoping he's made his mentor proud. As Connor looks up, there's an uneasiness in the air where he suddenly sees a massive army appear in the tree line. Connor immediately recognizes the situation. It's the Templars. He runs over to his students, directing their attention to the massive wave headed their way. The assassins assume defense positions and wait as the sea of red and black approaches. The assassins are hopelessly outnumbered, and standing at the front of the army is the Grand Master Shay Cormac. Shay and the army of Templars behind him stop just at the bottom of the hill before entering the homestead. Shay calls out to Connor and tells him it's his last chance to reveal the location of the apple without any bloodshed. Connor yells back at Shay, stating that the apple is too powerful and corruptible for any one man to wield, and it's better off that nobody has it at all. Shay responds by saying it's a shame that Connor didn't follow in his father's footsteps and join the Templars. Shay signals his forces to advance, while Connor orders the assassins to fight until the last man. You now play as Connor in a last stand against the massive incoming army. You're to kill as many Templars as you can. Connor begins to easily cut through the charging Templar army, tomahawk in hand. However, his students do not share the same strength or stamina as they begin to fall one by one. Before you know it, Connor stands alone, the last remaining defense. He continues to dismantle the incoming waves, however he grows more and more exhausted. Connor's tomahawk is knocked out of his hands, now solely relying on his hidden blade as he continues to fight. He's now completely encircled, Templars attacking from all sides. Connor can only hope to hold out for a little longer, then suddenly he catches the back end of a musket and is knocked flat on the ground. Several Templars rush in to pin him to the ground as he kicks and fights them off. It takes about 5 of them just to get him to hold still, and as Connor is pinned on his back to the ground, above him appears Shay with the precursor box in hand. Shay, in frustration, expresses all this bloodshed could have been avoided, but then again, assassins do love death. Shay begins to pace around, observing the homestead, exclaiming it's just how he remembers it. Shay crouches down and asks Connor if Achilles ever mentioned him. Connor, in his classic sassy tone, remarks Achilles told him enough, as he refers to Shay as the traitor. Shay laughs and begins to talk about how assassins always see the world in such a simple way, black and white. And he questions Connor if he's ever thought that it's possible that maybe the assassins are wrong, that maybe they destroy more than they protect. Maybe their goals are noble, but their actions don't follow. Shay says confidently that he's sure Achilles never mentioned Lisbon. Connor remains quiet. Shay figures and says that Connor would never understand anyway, considering he killed his own father over a pointless conflict. The mention of Hatham riles up Connor as he begins to fight and toss around, trying to break free of those who have pinned him. Shay asks the Templars to stand Connor up. Shay puts away the precursor box, asks the other Templars to not interfere, and asks those currently holding Connor to let go of him. The Templars encircle Connor and Shay, who are now standing only a dozen feet apart. Shay puts his fists up and says, "Let's see what Achilles taught you." I'm sure you can imagine that in his Irish accent. Connor gets in a fighting stance and approaches Shay. Shay throws the first punch, connecting right at the side of Connor's head, but that was the last punch he'll connect. Connor quickly throws a punch back, hitting Shay square in the jaw. He continues attacking aggressively, overwhelming Shay with a flurry of punches. The now old and gray Shay doesn't stand a chance against Connor's brute strength as he continues to be devastated with massive punches from Connor. Finally, Connor lands a punch right in the center of Shay's face, knocking him on his back. Connor quickly realizes the opportunity, activates his hidden blade, and lunges at Shay, who's still on the ground. Shay reaches for his pistol and shoots Connor just as he nearly connects with a hidden blade strike. Connor drops to his knees as Shay slowly gets back up. The bullet hit Connor right in the abdomen. Shay asks for the precursor box back and holds it next to Connor. As Shay searches Connor's memories, he sees where Connor dropped the apple into the ocean. His mission now complete, Shay orders the Templars to move out and to organize a shipping crew. As they march away from Connor, he falls flat on his back, looking up at the sky. He's in immense pain, however there's a smile on his face as we switch to a first-person perspective where Connor sees an astral projection of both Hatham and Achilles in the sky. Time then passes rapidly as quickly the sky turns black as night has fallen when Arno and Avalyn finally arrive at the homestead. They are quickly panicked by the aftermath, finding dead assassins scattered throughout the snow-covered yard. They run up to the front of the homestead where they find Connor, lifeless but peaceful, holding his tomahawk in his arms. Avalyn runs over to Connor's body, whereas Arno stands in complete stillness. Another person he couldn't save. Several more hours have passed as Arno and Avalyn sit inside the homestead, still shaken up but determined. Arno begins to question Avalyn, asking if Connor ever told her where he hid the apple. Avalyn denies he ever did and said that only he knew where it was. Arno frustratingly claims to be out of ideas. Avalyn says their only option now is to find Shay and the Templars before it's too late. She refuses to let Connor's life's work be undone. Arno agrees and suggests they split up. He'll head to Boston and Avalyn to New York to see if they can learn anything. As they split up and head out, we fade to black. We cut to Arno's arrival in Boston as you are tasked with finding out where Shay and the Templars have gone. Arno's search at first turns up nothing. After a couple of weeks, however, Arno starts to notice the people of Boston acting strangely. They're all being extremely friendly and acting almost robotic, like they've been programmed. Arno then notices a giant flock of people around Fort Hill in the center of Boston receiving food and clothing, praising the Grand Master. Arno decides to sneak into the fort where he spots a few Templars patrolling. Arno is certain this is the place. It's extremely fortified. It would take an army alone just to get through the walls of the fort. He exits the fort and writes a letter addressed to Avalyn, requesting she make her way to Boston immediately. Arno hands the letter to a courier on his way to New York and continues to spend the next few days studying the fort, looking for any weak points or opportunities. He notices that every few hours a couple of Templars leave the fort to patrol the outside. Arno seizes the opportunity to kill the guards and steal their uniforms. Another few days pass when finally Avalyn arrives in Boston at Fort Hill, just like Arno told her to in the letter. Arno catches Avalyn up to speed on the fort and its defenses as he tells her he believes Shay and the apple to be inside. Avalyn says she's brought a few assassins who were out on a mission in New York while the attack on the homestead occurred and that they're here to help. Arno fills in Avalyn on his plan to disguise as guards and for her and the other assassins to sabotage the gunpowder reserves and create a distraction while Arno slips in and finds Shay and the apple. Avalyn and the other assassins nod understandably as they all put on guard outfits outfits and head towards the fort. Arno walks up to the guards at the front gate, and when they question him about his business, Arno persuasively explains that he and the others, pointing at Evelyn and the other assassins, were just transferred and they were sent to help reinforce the Grand Master. The guards initially appear confused, but they both shrug and figure they could use the extra help. They move out of the way, signaling Arno, Evelyn, and the others to come in. As they walk into the massive fort filled with Templars, Arno and Evelyn nod at one another as they split off. Arno parkours up to a vantage point to see if he can find Shay, while Evelyn and the others continue to walk toward the gunpowder reserves, assassinating any guards stealthily along the way. Arno focuses hard with his eagle vision, where he overhears a guard talking about how the Grand Master doesn't like to be bothered when he's using the artifact, and now he's always holed up in his chambers. Arno moves into position, slowly following the guards as they carry food to be delivered to Shay's chambers. They arrive at a locked wooden door, and as they knock, Arno double assassinates them and kicks down the door. The room is dark, and in the back, near a desk, there's a bright yellow glow. The glow is coming from the apple, sitting firm in Shay's hands, who is so entranced by the artifact that he hasn't even paid mind to Arno's forceful intrusion. Shay turns to Arno, who's standing in the doorway, as he asks Arno to admire the apple's beauty. Shay goes on to explain all the good he can do with such a power. No more hunger, no more disease, no more fighting and meaningless death. The world can finally be at eternal peace, as he uses what he's already done to Boston as an example. Shay then quickly grows angry about why the assassins would even want to stop him from completing such a task. In an outburst of rage directed at Arno, Shay yells about how the assassins never even cared about the lives of the innocent. They claim to want freedom and peace, but aren't willing to take the steps necessary in order to achieve it. Arno responds with more anger as he stares down his father's killer, yelling, who is he to think he can play at being God? What gives him the right to wield such a power and decide what's best for the world? As Shay is about to respond, a sudden explosion in the background disrupts the argument. The room begins to shake as debris falls from the ceiling. Shay seizes the opportunity as he uses the apple to freeze Arno in place and run out of the room. Once Shay has gotten further away down the hall, Arno is able to break free of the apple's grasp and chases after Shay as the walls and area around them begin to collapse from the explosions. As Arno chases Shay out of the living area and back into the courtyard, he sees explosions setting off everywhere as Evelyn and the assassins are fighting Templars in the center. As Arno runs to help them, he is pulled in by the apple's grasp as Shay stands above him, freezing him in place once again with the apple. Shay claims Arno is too young and naive to think of the bigger picture, and that he doesn't know the assassins like he does. They claim to be the saviors of the world, but will eventually end up destroying it. As Shay sends out clones of himself to fight Arno, reminiscent of what Al Mualim and Rodrigo Borgia did in the first two AC games. As you're thrust into the boss fight against multiple Shays, Shay then summons significant people from Arno's memories to fight him in the second stage of the boss fight. Connor, Elise, Francois de la Serre, and his own father, as they attempt to get into Arno's head, saying he failed them and their deaths are his fault. After you defeat the second phase, this then triggers the third and final phase of the boss fight, where you must fight Shay in a 1 versus 1 with him being supernaturally powered by the apple. After a long and tough boss fight, we go back to a cutscene as Arno and Shay continue to fight and clash swords. Arno knocks Shay's sword out of his hand, but Shay counters using the power of the apple to send Arno falling flat on his back. Shay activates his hidden blade and goes for the kill as Arno blocks with his own hidden blade. Shay activates his second hidden blade on his opposite wrist with the apple in hand as Arno catches his arm with his free hand and tries to hold off Shay. Arno squeezes Shay's wrist with all his might, forcing Shay to drop the apple as Shay panics and immediately dives for the apple. Arno pushes him back, grabs his sword, spins, and runs in Shay right through the abdomen. Shay falls down in front of Arno and with his final words asks Arno to promise him that he'll devote his life to protecting the innocent people of the world as he did. Arno, feeling a huge mixture of emotions, mainly anger, doesn't respond to Shay's request, but nods ever so slightly in acknowledgement. Arno sheathes his sword as he walks over to the apple laying on the floor, when it suddenly activates, revealing to him all sorts of information relating to the past, present, and future. Evelyn walks up the steps, sees Shay, and then looks over to Arno, who's standing over the apple just staring. Arno hesitantly picks up the apple and for a second is enticed by the power before he stops himself and hands it over to Evelyn, claiming he wants nothing to do with it and asks Evelyn to hide or destroy it if possible. Evelyn looks concerningly at the shiny object in her palm realm, as she agrees to hide it somewhere no one will ever find it. We then pan out to reveal the destroyed fort from a tall bird's eye view, where the screen slowly fades to black. We then cut to a shot of the homestead as you see two figures kneeling before a grave. The camera then zooms in on the graves that say Achilles Davenport, Connor Davenport, and then to the left, next to Achilles' grave, revealing the headstone that says Connor Kenway. We then see both Arno and Evelyn kneeling before the grave as Arno whispers, "Thank you, mentor." Arno and Evelyn both stand up, where Evelyn asks Arno what he will do now, and that he's welcome to stay as she could use some help rebuilding the homestead and leading the assassins. Arno politely declines the offer as he explains that the Brotherhood in France is in shambles and the revolution is still ongoing and he is needed. Evelyn smiles and nods understandably as Arno and Evelyn shake hands. We then cut to Arno stepping onto a ship as he begins to set sail for France, as we cut back to Evelyn, who steps out to lead her new assassin recruits in front of the homestead. We cut back to Arno as his ship sails off into the sunlight. The end. Roll credits. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this is the kind of game and story I would definitely play. I tried my best to make things as detailed as possible so you can really imagine all these different scenes, but I think it resolved a lot of questions and storylines that we as fans have, and leaves a little opportunity for some potential DLCs with Arno rebuilding the French assassins, while Evelyn does the same in America. But this was super fun to write and come up with. I really enjoy these types of videos where I get to be creative, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. You probably noticed there was no modern day, and that's simply because I feel there was no need for it. There's so many big characters and things to cover that a modern day would feel kind of boring and pointless, so it's solely about all of these beloved AC characters. Also, again, I was just talking about the main story points. Obviously, there could be more side stories and side quests for it to be the proper length of a full game. It also, of course, would need to have good gameplay. Of course, a story is very important, but if the gameplay isn't fun, then nobody is really going to want to play it. I don't have many specifics. I just obviously hope the gameplay goes for a more traditional approach with some innovations as well. Free-flowing combat that's more complex with combos and a wide range of weapons, fast, flashy, and smooth parkour, fast-paced and aggressive stealth with a bunch of assassin tools and skills, and one-shot assassinations is a necessity. Essentially, how I would imagine it is just built upon the gameplay from Unity, because I really enjoy Unity's gameplay, but with some improvements and refinements to many things like the combat and stealth would be awesome. As for the setting, the first act takes place in France, while acts 2 and 3 take place in America, mainly New York, Boston, and the homestead. So it would be the worlds of Unity and AC3 combined, and of course it won't just be copied and pasted from those games. I'm sure Ubisoft could design great new updated worlds for these areas, plus being able to travel between them without going through a series of loading screens. There would of course be a lot of side quests and side content to partake in the world, shops, customization, the whole 9 yards. Again, I'm not gonna be as specific with that stuff, but that's how I imagine the game in my head. Oh, and one more thing, you do mostly play as Arno in this game, but there's that section at the beginning where you play as Shay, and the last stand where you play as Connor. So I think it'd be cool if once you finish the game, you had the ability unlocked to switch between the characters and free roam with all three. That would be awesome. I'd also want each character to have a unique set of animations and weapons to distinguish them, and I also want Arno's strength in the gameplay to be represented as he gets more powerful through that 4-month time skip training under Connor, like unlocking more move sets and powerful skills. That'd be great. Hey, so one more thing, guys. As I was finishing this video, I just remembered something. Connor totally lives past 1797. In fact, I think I looked it up. His last known entry is in 1804. So that's kind of awkward. I'm sorry, guys. That's my bad. I just wanted to give him a legendary badass death like he deserved. You know? So, I apologize. I completely forgot about that. But, I mean, we could easily change the years this story takes place. I just didn't want it to be too far after Unity, because then Shay would be really old. Like, he's already pretty old here at 65. Anymore, it's gonna be like in his 70s. And I'd rather have Shay at least still be able to fight and stuff. So, yeah, that one's on me. I mean, it's not like this is official, right? So it's not a huge deal, but, you know, I know some people will probably get mad at me for not realizing that, and I'm sorry. So, but again, this could be subject to change, and it's not like this is an official story or anything, so it's not like it's gonna conflict with the canon, whatever, you know what. But let me know what you guys think of this AC game I've come up with, and if you enjoyed it and want to make it happen, let's send this to Ubisoft. Who are we kidding? They likely won't ever do this, but what does it hurt to try? But other than that, thank you all for watching. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here, and have a great day, Assassins.